Hello, I am Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here to talk some NCAA baseball tournament regionals. I'll give you some thumbnail sketches of the teams involved, some predictions. Now, we have already done 5 videos. If you are looking for info on Knoxville, Lexington, College Station, Fayetteville, or Athens, those all have their separate videos. We've divided these between the teams that are hosting. They all got their own videos, and then everybody else, which is 6 teams. That's LSU, Vanderbilt, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, and Mississippi State, all in respectively the Chapel Hill, Clemson, Tallahassee, Raleigh, Stillwater, and Charlottesville regionals. We'll talk about those teams and their opponents in this video today. And before we get into that, reminder, BetOnline is your #1 source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, the NBA, NHL playoffs, all the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on all the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. I will go in this order: Chapel Hill, Clemson, Tallahassee, Raleigh, Stillwater, and Charlottesville. So if you're looking for your team, that gives you about an idea of where you're going to be in this video. Okay, we will start in Chapel Hill, which I think is the most interesting regional in the whole thing. I did not think that North Carolina should have been matched with LSU, which was a high-end 2 seed, and North Carolina, a top 5 team in the country. In fact, it got the number 4 seed in the tournament. I thought North Carolina deserved an easier 2 than LSU, but that's the way the committee did it, and that's what's making this interesting, along with Wofford as a 3 seed, which has got a stud pitcher. I'm going to go by these teams in order of 1 to 4, so we will start with North Carolina. And North Carolina's carrying card is its hitting. This is one of the best hitting teams in the country. You got 4 guys: Luke Stevenson, the catcher, who had 13 home runs. Parks Harbor had 20, the Georgia transfer. Casey Cook had 18. Vance Honeycutt, who is a big-time draft prospect, 22 home runs and 28 steals. And Albert Ozuna, the DH, had 14 home runs. That's 5 guys with at least 13 home runs. These guys take a lot of walks, too. Not surprisingly, power teams get walked a lot. So North Carolina has got a lineup that is one for anybody to contend with. It'd be a handful. All right, now on the pitching end, this is not one of the better North Carolina staffs. And again, it is a high offensive era in college baseball. Jason DeCaro, I guess, is their #1. He had a 3.80 ERA. Maybe the best pitcher on that staff in terms of effectiveness, Dalton Pence, who had an ERA of 2.14 in 42 innings, did issue a good number of free passes. But when you score runs at a clip that North Carolina did, you win a lot of games. And Shea Sprague and Adam Hall in the 2 and 3 spots, I would presume, did have ERAs of 4.02 and 4.07. And anyway, there's some other guys in the bullpen that pitched well too, but hitting was the calling card for North Carolina. That is what got the Tar Heels the number 4 seed in the tournament. LSU, this team was dead and buried in April. And then what happened? Starting pitching happened. Gage Jump and Luke Holman were a top 5 tandem, probably in terms of 1-2 punch in America, and I think certainly would have been that in the final, say, month of the season. Jump and Holman just were money every time they took the ball. You saw that carry over to the SEC tournament. That is where LSU's bread is buttered, is when those kids are on the hill. They are super tough to hit, and I think you will see both again pitching as major league starters down the line. Now, the rest of LSU's pitching staff, it was hit and miss, but I think people have focused on the miss part and not the hit part. And LSU's probably got 13, 14 guys it could throw in this regional. And it's not always going to be pretty. When you threw Nate Ackenhausen or Christian Little out there, you didn't always know what you were going to get. Justin Lohr, the Xavier transfer, same thing. But I think people focused on the negative and maybe not enough on the positive. And here's the upside for LSU in this tournament, I think. And that's if it's not working out with an Atkinhusen or a Little or Fidel Aloa or whoever. You just call it a day, bring in the next guy. And oh, by the way, Griffin Herring, the best guy, lefty, threw 42 innings of a 188 ERA. So they do have a stud arm out of the bullpen. That's what I like about LSU. It's got some elite arms, but it's also got some guys on a given day that it might work. And as for the offense, this is a bunch that kind of came on late in the season. Jared Jones, their first baseman, was their best hitter for the most part. Hit a 471-foot home run in the SEC tournament. Tommy White, their All-American third baseman, hit 24 home runs. Didn't have the greatest season in the first half, but really came on in the second half. Michael Braswell, their shortstop, hit well in the conference tournament. You've got some other guys here. Ashton Larson, freshman, came on late in the year. They've got some bench options too. So I think the pitching probably ahead of the hitting for LSU, but it's a pretty good hitting lineup too. And enough bats there to get LSU through this regional, even though I think it's the pitching that gives LSU the best. All right, let's talk about Wofford, this 3 seed, and LSU's opponent in this tournament in the first game. Some power there. Dixon Black, 13 home runs. Tyler Hare, 16. Daniel Jackson had 6. Marshall Toole had 9. This was a lineup that hit some. I think the focal point of this team, though, Jac Caglianone, the number 1 starter who threw 104 innings, had a 3.81 ERA, and struck out 118 guys. That matchup, presumably between he and Gage Jump on Friday night, is going to be the thing that has people's attention. And that could be the wild card in this. I think this is going to come down to North Carolina and LSU, but a stud pitcher gives you a chance in an opener in a close game. It could go either way. And I think that is the wild card in this one, is that Friday night pitching matchup here between LSU and. As for Long Island, which will be North Carolina's matchup in that Friday game, I don't think the Tar Heels got a lot of breaks in this regional, but the one break they did get, I thought LIU was probably one of the 2 or 3 worst 4 seeds in this field. I guess what they do is they do have some guys that hit home runs. Jack Power, the catcher, JC Navarro, the first baseman, and Jake Mastillo, hit 11, 15, and 16 home runs respectively. But what you really fear in a 4 is you don't want to get that 4 seed that just got a stud pitcher. And when I look at the stats, and granted, I did not watch this team play, the best they've got is Justin DeCastro, who threw 46 innings with a 3.72 ERA. Reliever PJ Moritz, 42 innings of a 3.38. I just don't see a pitching staff that matches up very well with North Carolina in game 1. All right, let's talk picks. To me, this is one of the toughest regionals to pick. North Carolina will be favored. It does play at home. Again, it was an elite team in college baseball this year. But when I look at this, I look at the matchups, and I just like LSU's pitching with Holman and Jump. Those guys were so tough. That is a reason that LSU ended up in the finals of Hoover, where it got beat by Tennessee. And I think, again, having pieces to your bullpen who are capable of delivering on a given day is something that's getting slept on with this team. I'm going to call for an upset with LSU winning the Chapel Hill Regional. Degree of confidence in this, not great, because I'm a little scared of that Wofford game on Friday night. If they go pitch for pitch with LSU, that could be anybody's game. And then all of a sudden, if LSU loses it, they're coming out of a winner's bracket. And then the pitching gets a little bit dicier. But you got to take a chance somewhere. I'm going to go LSU based on having enough offense, based on having a guy in Tommy White who's been there and done that. And again, those 2 stud starting pitchers, I think, just make them so tough. Give me LSU in an upset in the Chapel Hill Regional. All right, let's move along down the road in the ACC to Clemson, where Clemson, as it seems to do quite often, drew Vanderbilt as its 2 seed. These teams matched up in 2017 and 2018, I believe it was, with Vanderbilt winning the regional both times. Gary Gilmore in Coastal Carolina, his swan song, one of the legendary coaches in NCAA baseball. he's going out, retiring after this year. Coastal Carolina, a little bit of a surprise inclusion in the NCAA tournament, and High Point, a little bit of a pesky 4 seed who could do some damage. Anyway, we will start with Clemson, and the calling card for Clemson is that lineup. You've got catcher Jimmy Obertop, 19 home runs. Third baseman Blake Wright, 21 home runs. Shortstop Jacob Hinderlander, he had 13 home runs. I think that's how you pronounce the name. Might be Hinderleiter. Excuse me if I botched that. I'm an SEC guy, not an ACC guy. You had other guys with power in that lineup. Cam Canarella, 9 home runs, a guy who's played a lot of college baseball and is an ace in center field. And Aiden Mathis in right field hit 9 home runs. This is a park that's got short dimensions. It's not as much of a hitter's park as you'd think, I guess, because of foul territory, but it is a home run ballpark, and the ball gets out there pretty quickly, and you saw Clemson take advantage of that for much of the season. The pitching staff, not as good as the hitting for Clemson, but you do have some arms there. Aiden Knack, the freshman, who pitches out of the 3-hole and was not as effective late in the season, but he led the team in innings with 73, ERA with 296, and strikeouts with 97. They have some other capable arms in that bullpen, Matthew Marchal, Austin Gordon, some guys like that. They do have some pitchers, but the 1 and 2 holes, Tristan Smith there too, who I would presume you will see in that Saturday night game, 41 innings of a 4.17 ERA. He's a lefty, and I think he's a top 150 prospect for the draft. Now for Vanderbilt, the strength of Vanderbilt is usually the pitching, and that's the case again this year. Bryce Cunningham in that 1 hole was SEC Pitcher of the Week a couple of times. Other times it didn't work out as well. Lexington, Kentucky, his last regular season start, that was kind of a disaster. J.D. Thompson emerged in the 2 hole as a surprise. He was the team's ERA leader with a 2.98 ERA and did a good job of keeping the ball in the park. That's always a challenge when you're facing Clemson and Clemson. They've got Devin Futrell presumably in the 3 hole. He's a lefty who's pitched a lot of ball. He's fly ball prone, so pitching in Clemson could be an issue. And then you've got some wild cards here. Ethan McIlvain, maybe their most talented lefty reliever. He didn't pitch for a month, showed up and started and threw an inning in the SEC tournament. If he's back and healthy for Vanderbilt, and he had a back issue that sidelined him for about a month, he's super tough. They've got some other freshman lefties there, Miller Green, who's a freshman lefty and maybe their best and most effective reliever on balance this season. Brendan Cyber, a righty who was really good, and Tim Corbin counted on him a lot. But the wild card in this one, Carter Holton, their preseason All-American who has not pitched in a couple of weeks. He's been shut down several times over the last couple of years just with trying to get that arm fresh. I don't know what the plan is for Carter Holton in this regional. I think he's on the travel roster, and he's a guy who can start and give you 110 pitches. Does Vanderbilt do that? When he pitched against Kentucky, he was not effective. The fastball velo was dipping. Could you see him in a high leverage relief situation? Maybe. That wasn't how he was used throughout his career. But if you're going to keep him on a limited pitch count, and I don't know if that's the case or it's not, that might be something to keep an eye on. As for Vanderbilt's lineup, what was kind of subpar by SEC standards most of the year, but this team did hit late. Alan Espinal, 12 home runs, led the team. He's their catcher. Jonathan Vastine, a very good shortstop. He hit 10 bombs. Calvin Hewitt came on in the SEC tournament. 436 on base percentage, led the team. This team had health issues, but that led to some lineup confusion and some jumbling of things, and you didn't always know what Tim Corbin was going to run out there one series after the next. It feels like they found a little stability. RJ Austin back at second base where he played better. Braden Holcomb, their first baseman, huge power threat. This kid looks like 1-2. He's built like Mark McGuire. He hit 5 home runs, but you could see him really come on as he learned to lay off breaking balls and hit really well as the season progressed. On paper, not a great offense, but it's one that got better. And, oh, by the way, Jaden Davis, who missed the last 4 or 5 weeks with an injury. He came back and got an at-bat in the SEC tournament. So keep an eye on him as well. Okay, the Commodores will draw Coastal Carolina in the opener, and stop me if you've heard this before. A lineup that hits bombs and takes a lot of walks. Graham Brown, 12 home runs. Blake Barthol, the second baseman, hit 15. Zach Beach hit 16. Every single one of Coastal Carolina's top 11 hitters all drew double-digit walk rates. Now, they strike out some too. There's a lot of swing and miss with this bunch, particularly with Beach and Barthol, and also Sam Antonacci, maybe their best hitter. We didn't mention him earlier, but had a .526 on base percentage, took walks 17% of the time, only struck out 13% of the time. This is a lineup that's got some patience and it's got some power, and that's never fun to pitch to in a regional. Coastal Carolina's pitching, a little bit of a different story. This team was built on offense. The only one of its top 11 or 12 pitchers that had a sub-4 ERA, Henry Waker, the lefty who threw 49 in the third innings with a 3.62 ERA. Their starters, righty Eichhoff, had a 5.30 ERA. Cam Fluke had a 5.77 ERA. These guys had trouble keeping the ball in the park a lot of times. That's something, again, that is problematic at Clemson. As for High Point, this is one of the better 4 seeds in the tournament. Again, power, 4 double-digit home run guys. Adam Stewart with 11, Eric Grintz with 11, Braden Simpson with a dozen, Cale Cheatham with 17. As for the pitching, Gus Hughes, their Friday night starter, 95 2/3 innings, 104 strikeouts. So a guy that turned in just under a 4 ERA. Again, not something you want to see in your opener as a guy who's a bit of an ace. Now, the problem for Hughes, home runs, he gave them up 5.4% of the time. So maybe that matchup tilts a little bit more favorably in Clemson's direction, given that. The bullpen, not great, but this was a team that competed with other Power 5 teams at times and played pretty well. And again, probably one of the better 4 seeds in the tournament. And when you get down to 2 and 3 starters, Brett Wozniak and Matt Little both had ERAs under 4.5, both threw around 80 innings. So a little starting pitching depth there for High Point. Won't be an easy opener for Clemson. All right, predictions. This is one of the tougher ones to pick. And Clemson, I think, the best team in this regional, but just something about the way Clemson plays in Clemson. I don't think it's gotten out of a regional since 2011. Tim Corbin going up against Eric Bakich. Those guys both coached together at Vandy. I think Vandy's pitching and the way that it came on late and the way the Commodores found some help. I'd like to know a little bit more about Carter Holton. If I know he's going to be pitching at max Carter Holton, then I probably feel a little bit more confident. But I'm going to pick my spot here. I'm going to take, just like I took LSU, I will take Vandy in an upset in the Clemson Regional. Don't feel wonderful about it because I'm not sure Vandy can hit enough, but I'll take my chance with the Commodores on some late season momentum and maybe more pitching health than they've had all year. All right, moving on to Tallahassee, we will talk about the host Florida State Seminoles. The ball really gets out in Tallahassee with the short dimensions down the lines. Been to games there before, and this is a lineup built to the ballpark. You had 4 double-digit home run guys. Cam Smith with 14 home runs, also a .487 on base percentage. James Tibbs topped him, 25 bombs, .498 and .814. in terms of on base and slugging. A couple other guys who hit home runs there. Jamie Farrer, 17 bombs, .417 on base percentage. This team had, what was it? I think 9 guys who hit at least 6 home runs. So it may not be a lineup where they're all hitting bombs all the time, but that's tough to pitch to. When you got a bunch of guys that are capable of taking it out of the yard, which in Tallahassee, it gets out there pretty quickly from what I've seen. It's a dangerous lineup to pitch to. This team scored almost 9 runs a game this season. All right, as for the pitching, the headliner there, Jamie Arnold, he went 10-3 with a .245 ERA in 88 and a third inning, struck out nearly 14 batters per 9 innings. In fact, this was a staff that had some pretty high strikeout numbers. They've got 7 or 8 guys that were all double-digit per 9 strikeout guys. Now, they got hit a little bit. You're not going to see some stellar ERAs up and down the staff. Brendan Oxford threw 26 innings of a 3.04 ERA. That's probably the best they've got. But again, when you hit like they hit and you've got an ace in Jamie Arnold, you got a shot. That's why Florida State was a national seed. Let's talk about Alabama, the 2-seeded Crimson Tide. And this is a team that really, really lived with its power much of the year. Justin LeBron, Alabama's shortstop, had a tremendous year, was all SEC defensive team, and also produced at an elite level at the plate. You've got third baseman Gage Miller, the JUCO transfer, had 18 home runs, a 486 on-base percentage. TJ McCants, the center field transfer from Ole Miss, ran kind of hot and cold, but finished the season with 14 home runs. Will Hodo, the first baseman, had 11 home runs and a 402 on-base percentage. And you had some other guys, too. This was a team that had a little bit of a deep bench. Ian Petritz, the transfer, had 6 home runs and a 447 on-base percentage. So Alabama really was a scary offensive team to face at times. And again, a team that's got some power, which could play to Alabama's advantage in Tallahassee. Now, the pitching is the question. And this is a pitching staff that is not deep in terms of guys who were super effective. But their top-end guys, when they were on, were really, really good. Greg Farone, their Friday night starter, was very good most of the year, was an all-SEC candidate. He's a transfer from Louisville, pitched a lot of ball in his time. Zane Adams, the freshman, I believe was SEC Pitcher of the Week one week. He had a 5.37 ERA, but some weeks it was really good. So keep an eye on him in the 2-hole. Ben Hess, maybe the wild card of the entire regional is Ben Hess. He had a 5.98 ERA this year, and for the most part was not good. But his last 2 starts were really good. Hess is considered a major league pitching prospect. He's a kid that when he's on can really give you trouble. And hey, Alabama, if Alabama gets good starts out of Adams, Hess, and Farone, this team could make a run if the bullpen can hold up. And that's the problem. They've got some talented arms there like Alton Davis, Braylon Myers. Myers was their most effective guy and their only bullpen guy that got used a lot with an ERA under 3. Not a strikeout guy, but maybe a keep the ball on the ground guy, which comes in handy in Tallahassee. But I think Alabama, it's going to depend on what kind of starting pitching the Crimson Tide get in this one. All right, let's talk about 3-seeded Central Florida for a minute. And look, I did not watch this team play this year. I'm just looking at stats and things like that. But a similar comp to UCF might be Vanderbilt in that it was not a team that hit a lot of home runs. Jack Cijintje, their right fielder, hit 10. He was the only double-digit home run guy they had. Not elite on-base percentages, but a lot of guys in that 410 to 430 range. And so what can be pesky is a lineup of a lot of guys that get on base. They've got that, but it's not a team that's going to scare you with its power. Now, what it will do is pitch you. And you got a lot of good arms in here. In fact, some people think this is the best pitching staff in the regional. You've got some guys, Kyle Kramer out of the bullpen, had a 2.88 ERA in almost 41 innings. Dominic Castellano, 56 innings of a 2.73 ERA. Got a lot of guys like that on the roster up and down. And your 2 and 3 starters there, Ben Vespi and Dom Stagliano, each had ERAs of 4.5 or under through over 70 innings. Pitching depth is what gets you through a regional, and I think Central Florida has got some of that for sure. All right, now let's move to 4th-seeded Stetson. That's another team kind of in that UCF mold where it's built probably a little bit more on pitching than hitting. Just 2 double-digit home run guys in Lorenzo Meola and Johan Desseralt, I guess is how you pronounce it. Good luck to you there. They hit 10 and 11 home runs respectively. Again, a lot of guys in that 400 to 430 on base range in that lineup. And Stetson may be the toughest 4 seed in the field. And again, some of that's going to be based on pitching. This is Eric McAfee, starter/reliever, 62 in the third innings, 4.48 ERA, struck out over 10 guys per nine. This was not a heavy strikeout staff, but you got some good ERAs in here. Zane Coppersmith with a 155. And a lot of guys right around that 4 mark, which is pretty good in this day and age of college baseball. Not sure if Stetson's got the balance on the whole offensively and pitching-wise with elite guys to win a regional, but certainly a team that could put a scare into Florida State in the regional opener. Picks, boy, this one's tough to pick because I think Central Florida could throw things for a loop with its pitching. If it can beat Alabama in game 1, got a chance to match up okay with Florida State. Alabama, I just would like to see a little more pitching depth and a little more consistency from Hess. I think if it gets it, it can win the regional. But for lack of a better idea, I'm going with Florida State, the host and the favorite in this regional, to win the Tallahassee regional. All right, staying in the ACC, which has got 5 of the 6 regionals that I'm talking about today. Let's go to Raleigh, North Carolina, where NC State is hosting a regional, and I think got a pretty evenly matched draw with the South Carolina team that I think is hey, pick one on a neutral field. I don't know who'd win this regional, but it's not on a neutral field. It's at NC State, and this is the team that again's got some power. 3 double-digit home run guys: Garrett Pennington with 14, Jacob Cozart with 16, Alex Markowitz with 19. Up and down the lineup, guys that don't strike out a lot. They put the ball in play. Not a lot of 20% strikeout rates. Guys that take some walks. South Carolina did that a lot too. So you may see some very high pitch count games in this regional. As for the pitching, there's not a Carlos Rodon on this staff. Sam Highfield, probably the best they've got. He's in his 4th year. He's pitched in the College World Series. He's got a 5.56 ERA. I presume he will be the guy taking the ball in game 1, but he gave up home runs at nearly a 6% clip. So did Dom Britton, who I think is their number 2. So the bullpen a little bit better at keeping the ball in the park, but not a lot of elite arms on this NC State staff. Seemed like it got it more done with hitting in this one. South Carolina, a team that I had trouble knowing what to do with a lot of the season. There were times I watched this team and thought this could be an Omaha team if the pitching comes through. The problem is the pitching never really came through consistently for the Gamecocks this year, and that's why I'm a little hesitant to pick this team to win a regional. But the bats are pretty good. Now, the problem with Carolina is Gavin Casas. I'm guessing he's not going to be available for the regional. I think he broke his hand, but they've got other guys. They got Ethan Petrie. They've got a very deep bench of outfielders that they can mix and match a little bit here, and also the DH role. They got Cole Messina, who was hitting bomb after bomb after bomb in Hoover, one of the best hitting catchers in the country. South Carolina can really hit the ball. The question is the pitch. And look, it's not like Carolina does not have some good arms. I'm just not sure if it's got enough of them, and you're not sure which one is going to show up when. Now, here's the best case scenario. Eli Jones can give them a good start. He's pitched a lot of ball in the SEC. They've got some good bullpen arms. Garrett Gainey, one of those guys, the highly emotional guy who closes for them. Ty Good has thrown really well at times. He had a 4.14 ERA in 54 1/3 innings. But this was a team that you felt like most days, whoever got the ball, if he went more than about 5 innings, that was, I'm not going to say unexpected, but this was a pitching staff that put it together, a few guys at a time. And look, there's enough talent on this staff with Chris Veach, who's pitched a lot of ball. Matthew Becker, very talented arm, who's pitched a lot of ball. Roman Kimball, a guy who was an opener for them at times. Connor McCrary was pretty effective. They've got enough arms. Tyler Pitzer, freshman, who's talented guy. Best ball was probably the first part of the season rather than the last part. They've got some arms. I just am not sure if they can string enough performances together with enough consistency. That was an issue for the Gamecocks from one week to the next. Okay, let's talk about James Madison, the 3 seed here for a minute. This was a little bit of a surprise inclusion in the field, but like a lot of teams in the field, This team got there by hitting home runs. 5 double-digit home run guys, led by catcher Jason, I guess, Shivavone. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but he hit 22 bombs for them this year. Brendan O'Donnell, the right fielder, hit 16. As for the pitching for the Dukes, they throw a lot of guys, but not really an ace on this staff. I guess the best guy out of the bullpen, Hunter Emsinger, who had a 2.75 ERA. Joe Vogatsky, another right-handed reliever, had a 3.14 in 43 innings. So that's a valuable thing in this tournament, having relievers who can go longer stints and be effective out of the bullpen. But the starting rotation, Jackson Logar, I guess they're number 3, 64 and 2/3 innings, had a 3.62 ERA. I don't know if he gets the ball to start, but they do have some effective pitching here, do the Dukes. All right, finally, the 4th-seeded Bryant Bulldogs, a team that seems to be in the NCAA tournament a lot. They really spread the workout across the pitching staff. They've got like 15 guys who threw double-digit innings. You don't see that a lot. I guess the ace of the staff would be Luke DeLongchamp, who threw 65 and a third innings with a 2.76 ERA. Had a lot of quality bullpen arms, but nobody that stands out as elite. As for the hitting side of things, this is the team with a couple of elite on-base guys. Zach Zion's a 4.72 on-base percentage. Gavin Noriega, a 4.88. Carmine Petosa, a 4.78. So guys that can really get on base a lot at the top of the lineup. A couple of big-time home run hitters in Petosa, I guess it is, and Noriega with 14 and 18 each. So Bryant, a team that had a little bit of balance both ways as it got into the NCAA tournament, which it seems like Bryant is an entry in this tournament about every other year. Predictions. I don't have a great feel for this one. I'm going to go North Carolina State just because it is the home team in this one. I don't know what to expect in the opening games. Could you see an upset here? Maybe. But I think if Carolina had a little bit better pitching, I think I could go with the Gamecocks in the upset. But I wanted to see a little more consistency out of the staff than I did. So I think I will take NC State at home for that reason. Okay, let's go to Stillwater, where Oklahoma State is the host and the favorite in this one. Nebraska, Florida, and Niagara also in this regional. Let's talk about the Cowboys, coached by Josh Holliday, who is the uncle of Jackson Holliday, the Orioles prospect, who has been on the radar of a lot of people, is the number 1 prospect in the minor leagues at this point. The Cowboys, one of the more balanced teams in this tournament. Power. Oklahoma State's always got it. 5 guys who hit double-digit home runs this year. Catcher Ian Doherty, first baseman Colin Brueggemann, left fielder Nolan Schubert, who led them with 20. Zach Earhart, who's been around a while in center field. He's got a dozen home runs. And Carson Benj, their right fielder, who had 17 along with 10 steals. This is a team that, again, high slugging percentages, a lot of guys north of 450. Schubert slugged 813. But I think the thing that I really like about the Cowboys is that pitching. You don't see a better 3-man rotation for the most part than what they've got. Brian Holiday, 104 innings pitched, 118 strikeouts, ERA of 3.12. Gave up home runs at a 2.9% clip. That comes in handy in a regional where you can keep the ball in the park. Sam Garcia, their number 2, 85 and a third innings, ERA of 3.27, 110 strikeouts. Jansen Keisel, their number 3, I guess. It looks like he's more of an opener than a starter. 34 and 2/3 innings, 3.38 ERA. And Robert Kranz out of the bullpen, a right-hander, 46 and a third innings, a 1.55 ERA and 57 strikeouts. This is a team that just got a little bit of it all. Starting pitching, relief pitching, and hitting. Nebraska is the number 2 seed in this field. The Cornhuskers were Big Ten champs, I believe. The Cornhuskers, not a super power-heavy team. 1 double-digit home run guy this year. That was Josh Caron, the catcher, Caron, I guess is how you pronounce it. But the pitching staff, again, I like teams that have got a lot of guys that can give you effective innings. this team's got it. Brent Sears, starting pitcher, 99 innings, ERA of 2 on the button, struck out about a batter an inning. You go down the bullpen. Mason McConaughey, I guess it is. It looks like he started some too. 67 innings of a 3.09 ERA. Jackson Brockett, 35 and a third of a 3.57. They've got a lot of guys who pitched a lot of ball for them this year. All right, the number 3 seeded Florida Gators, they earned their way in with not a sweep of Georgia, but they won 2 of 3 on the last weekend of the regular season. And Athens, a really, really tough place to win. Jac Caglianone, of course, the guy that everybody knows, the best two-way player in America. He usually was their number 3 starter. I would presume he will get the ball before that, because I don't think what you want to do if you're Kevin O'Sullivan is go 2 games and you didn't throw Jac Caglianone in one of them. So I don't know how they manage that. The issue with Florida, Ty Evans, their best hitter after Caglianone hurt, he's done for the year. Now, they got some guys that can show you some pop. Brody Donay, their catcher. Luke Heyman, their other catcher. Those guys and some other guys. Shelnut can deliver the long ball. And, of course, Colby Shelton, their shortstop transfer from Florida. But I'm just not sure without Evans. This isn't a team that gets on base at as high a rate as some of O'Sullivan's Florida teams do. And the pitching, look, they've got all kinds of talented arms. Colin Fisher, Pierce Coppola. But it seems like this is a very freshman-heavy staff. And these guys pitched well at times, but probably struggled more often than not. Now, some of that, the schedule. Florida played the number 1 strength of schedule in the country, so let's not lose sight of that. But I'm just not sure if the Gators have got quite enough pitching, and losing Evans really ate into their margin of error there as well. Okay, as for 4-seeded Niagara, which had a really good season, one of the better ones the program has had, again, recipe, a lot of guys get on base. A lot of balance throughout the lineup, not a lot of double-digit home run guys, but a lot of guys who could hit, say, 5 to 8. On-base percentages north of 390 up and down the lineup. This is a team that will press you, and I think that's a tough team to pitch to. When you've got a bunch of guys that get on base, that's what Niagara does. But I don't think they've seen pitching like Oklahoma State's. This one, to me, one of the easier picks that I'll do. I think Oklahoma State is an elite team. In fact, I think Oklahoma State is going to get out of this regional and then also knock out either Vandy or Clemson. Who comes out of the other side, I don't know. But whoever it is, I think Oklahoma State's the better team. Oklahoma State, I think, will breeze through this regional perhaps and end up eventually getting to Omaha. Okay, the last regional we will cover today is Charlottesville, and this is not an order of interesting regionals, because if it were, I would have moved this one up the list. I did this in order of best to worst national seed. Virginia, by virtue of being 12th on the list, that's why we're talking about them last, but I think this is a fascinating matchup. Virginia plays in a hitter's park, and boy, the stats look like it. This team was one of the best offensive teams in the country. I think it scored over 530 runs. You got a pair of 17 home run hitters in Jacob Ferentz and Henry Ford. Harrison Didewick led the team with 23 home runs, also added 13 steals. Casey Salke, their right fielder, had 13 home runs. This team ran a lot of guys around that half dozen stolen base mark. On-base percentages north of 400, consistently up and down the lineup. And everybody in the lineup, except for Griff O'Farrell, their shortstop, who's an outstanding player, slugged above 500. That's what you're getting in Virginia's lineup, just a nightmare to pitch to up and down the order. Now, the pitching, this is not Brian O'Connor's typical Virginia pitching staff. It seems like there's usually a first rounder in there somewhere, and maybe there is, but these guys didn't pitch like it. Again, maybe that's the product of pitching in that ballpark into an ACC that was very offensive dominated, but best pitcher statistically, or best in terms of talent, was probably Evan Blanco, who I guess is going to be their first starter in this one. Had an ERA of 3.5, does keep the ball in the ballpark. They've got some other guys here, but not the aces like you're used to seeing with Brian O'Connor's program. Now, I'll tell you who's got aces. That's Mississippi State. You got Cal Steven and Jurrangelo Cijintje, who I think with possible apologies to LSU. LSU's might have been better, but the discussion of 1-2 pitching punches in this league, I think probably boils down to those two programs, and pick your poison here. Either of them were really good. Cal Steven, the Purdue transfer, probably their most durable starter. Jurrangelo Cijintje, their switch pitcher who went almost exclusively right-handed as the year went on. That guy's stuff is electric. The fastball really plays up with his slider. He goes 98, 99. The problem with Cijintje is I've seen him do this a few times. He throws so hard and is so max effort that a lot of times by about the fifth inning, the stuff really starts to drop off in terms of location. So can you dial it down a little bit if you're Jurrangelo Cijintje, and maybe get a little deeper into the game? Maybe. But the fortunate thing is you got a bullpen. You got Tyler Davis, Tyson Harden, Cam Schulke, the guy with multiple arm angles. Gavin Black's been good. State's got a good enough bullpen. It's not an elite one, maybe. It might be, actually, if you compare them to other college bullpens in a year where pitching was just hard to come by because offense is favored in this day and age of baseball with the bats and the balls and everything. But you've got enough quality arms there that, hey, when he starts to slow down, Chris Lemonis can go to his pen pretty quickly and find guys to count on. Now, two wild cards in this regional. First, Brooks Auger, who is their third starter just because they had to pick somebody. And he was pretty ordinary, but he started pitching well late in the year. And then in the SEC tournament, he had a 13 strikeout outing and was picked the pitcher of the tournament. I don't think anybody saw that one coming necessarily, but if you've got Brooks Auger pitching along at that level with Steven and Cijintje, State's tough to beat. Oh, by the way, Nate Dohm. What's Nate Dohm going to do this tournament? I don't know. He was their best starter last year. He's been out for a while, supposed to pitch this weekend. He's as good as any of those guys when he's on. So State is flushed with pitching for this tournament, and that's a place you want to be once you get to this level of the. As for the lineup, boy, this is a complicated bunch. You've got some good players there. Connor Heisack, David Mershon, their shortstop and center fielder. Really good on base guys, can really run, can steal some bases, take extra bases, those kind of things. Amani Larry, their second baseman, improved his game late in the year. He had a better year last year than he did this year. Hunter Hines, first baseman, really can slug it in bunches, but wasn't consistent this season. He's a guy that I think is going to be a Major League Baseball player later. So is Dakota Jordan, their right fielder, maybe even a first-round pick. But Dakota Jordan and Hunter Hines just look lost in the SEC tournament. I don't know what happened with those guys, but Jordan got pulled late in the game against Vanderbilt when he was due up possibly the next inning. I think he went 0 for 17 to start the tournament. Just looked like he lost his confidence. Hines, again, it's been very hot and cold with this guy. It was cold in Hoover, but State's pitching was good enough anyway that State got, they won a couple of games in that tournament. So if you're Chris Lemonis, you're thinking, man, if my guys just hit the ball like they're capable, we can really go far. So keep that in your back pocket once we get to predictions here in a minute. All right, let's talk about third-seeded St. John's. And this is a team with a pretty deep pitching staff. You may remember the opening weekend of the season, St. John's went to Florida, won the series. Well, they only played one game. The other two got rained out, but St. John's did take down Florida in the opener. And you've got a bunch of guys on this staff that are adept at keeping guys off base. Tim Cunningham, one of those guys, 39 innings, 2.77 ERA. Luis Marinero, 45 and 2/3 innings, ERA of 2.56, but a whip under 1. This staff, Jed Boyle, guy with an ERA of 3.26, 12.1 strikeouts per 9 innings. These guys were a staff that was pretty deep and balanced. And again, that's a thing that really helps you in NCAA regional when you've got a lot of guys who can pitch on a moment's notice. The lineup, not an elite power group. Eric Ratasak, I guess is how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Okay, let's talk third seeded St. John's for a minute. What stands out with this bunch is a pitching staff of durable arms that were all quality. Mario Pesa, 70 to 30 innings, 294 ERA. They've got about 4 or 5 guys that went over 40 innings and all had ERAs south of 450. Tim Cunningham, right-hander out of the bullpen, was super effective, 39 innings, 277 ERA. Luis Marinero, lefty reliever with a 256 ERA. This is a staff that had a lot of guys that can pitch in a year where a lot of teams had trouble finding that. As for the lineup, not a spectacular one, but some good on base guys. You've got probably about half the lineup with a 415 on base percentage or higher. Leading home run hitter Jimmy Keenan, the catcher. So more balanced than standouts here. But in any case, that's St. John's kind of in a nutshell. As for fourth seeded Penn, I really don't see this team as a threat in this tournament. Now, it does have a good third baseman. White Hennisler, I think is how you pronounce his name. He had 22 home runs. I think D1 called him the best hitter in this regional. The pitching staff, okay. Carson Osmer, right-handed reliever out of the pen, had a 368 ERA. So he's probably their best option. They've got a decent Friday starter in Collins Firo, I guess is how you pronounce it. He's a right-hander that had an ERA just a shade under 5. So I think probably Virginia's lineup is going to be too much for Penn to manage in that game. This is a tough one. I think Virginia's hitting. Sometimes teams that hit like that gave Mississippi State problems, but you did see State take some games from some gorilla ball teams. I think State is a team that can pitch well enough just with the parts it has. But you add in Nate Dohm, if you get him and you get great Nate Dohm, then they're really tough to beat. But State at that point is probably a top 10 team in the country. And then Brooks Auger. If Brooks Auger duplicates what he showed in Hoover, then they're super tough. I'm going to go Mississippi State in the upset. When in doubt, I go with pitching. It's going to be a tough ask in Virginia, and the lineup's got to show up better than it did in Hoover. But I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to take Mississippi State to win the regional. All right, we'll be wrapping these up as they happen. Best way to get that, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and enable your notifications so you know when we come out with more content. This is Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.